Hello and welcome back. Today we are starting a brand new unit in this series on sequences, and the goal of this first recipe is to do a very quick overview of Python 3 built-in sequences. So generally speaking, Python 3 built-in sequences can be classified according to two main criteria. The first one being the type of objects they can contain. And for that, let's consider the first problem statement. Which kind of sequences are available in Python when we want to store objects of the same type? The answer to that is we have strings, we have bytes, we have byte array, memory view, and array. We're going to see each of these in much more detail on subsequent recipes, but for now, what a flat sequence means is that first, the objects they contain must be of the same type, and also the name flat comes from the fact that under the hood, the way they are stored in memory is contiguous. So the location of these four, if we take this example of these four elements stored within this array type, are very contiguously stored within the memory, hence the name flat. So if we run this first code snippet, we say that we have created an array. This I here means that we want to create an array where all the elements are of type integer, and you can see here when we print here we get the we get the array indeed. When we print this we get the first element, and we can get the type, as you can see, is of type integer. Well, what about putting a float? What happens if we run this snippet? Well, Python will complain integer argument expected got a float. That's why we say flat sequences are meant to store objects of the same type, and here we are trying to use to store both integers and floats, and Python cannot allow that. So that's it for the first classification criteria, which is the type of objects that the sequence can contain. But what if we want sequences where the inner objects within can be of different type? Well, in that case, Python 3 has built-in available for us list, tuples, and dequeue. So here let's consider these three elements that we want to store in these three different type of sequence. Container sequence, that's how they're called, compared to flat sequence. So we can create a list that contains a string, an integer, and a float, and it won't be a problem at all, as you can see here. Likewise, we can create a tuple with different types. It won't be an issue. And finally, we can create a dequeue with string, integer, and float without any issue. So that's it for the first criterion. Let's move to the second one. The second one is very important as well, perhaps even more than the previous one, which is sequences and mutability. What this means is when can we modify a sequence in place, and when can we not do that? So in order to understand, let's consider the first problem statement. Which sequences allow in-place updates in Python? In this category, for this criteria, we have mutable sequences, list, byte array, collections, dequeue. So in order to understand what this means, let's run this first code snippet. We see here that we have created a list with different strings, and here we are printing the ID of the list. The ID is actually the memory address, the address in memory of this comments object, and we will see why we are printing the address later on. Here, at this line here, we have modified in place the first comment in our list. So instead of Python 3 is greet with greet in lowercase, now greet is in capital case. And when we print, we see that the Python 3, the comments list now has the first element modified. What about the address? This address is exactly the same as this one, which is the object has been modified in place, because remember, this is the address in memory for these comments. So it's exactly the same, but now it has different elements. And that's why we say a list is mutable, because you can edit it in place. Likewise, we can add more elements to the list. The address will remain the same. We can pop elements, and again the address will remain the same, hence the term mutability. And in this category you have list, you have byte array and DQ. What about sequences that do not allow in-place edits? You have in this category tuples, strings and bytes. So let's consider the case of a tuple. Let's create a tuple like we did before, but here now we are trying to do an in-place edit like we did for the case of list here. Well, tuple are not meant for that. You cannot edit a tuple in place in Python, and that's why you get this exception. Tuple object does not support item assignment. Similarly, for strings you get the same exception. So here we are getting the first string from our comments tuple here, which is Python 3 is great, and we are trying to capital case the first string. We are trying to put this P in place, to change it in place into a capital P. Well, this will throw an exception. STA objects does not support item assignment. So that's it for immutable sequences in Python. And again, in this category you have tuple, strings and bytes. So that's the end of this recipe. Hopefully you learned something new. If the case, please give it a thumbs up. Also feel free to ask any question in the comment section. I will do my best to answer those. As always, you can find a link to the code in the description below. Be sure to subscribe for future videos, and thanks for watching.